Not content with cancelling people who are still alive, like Ollie Robinson, whose cricket career lies in tatters because of a few tweets he sent when he was a teenager, today's social justice activists want to cancel the dead. So there have been calls to tear down the statue of Mahatma Gandhi in Manchester because of his comments about African people. In July 2018, a group of students at Manchester University covered up a mural in the Union building which included the text of Rudyard Kipling's poem If. In Oxford, activists have declared that the statue of colonialist Cecil Rhodes at Oriel College makes them feel unsafe. And just the other week, 150 academics at the university said they would refuse to teach at Oriel College unless the statue was taken down. In February 2019, an interview for John Wayne for Playboy magazine resurfaced, and there was a huge outcry on social media, none of which mattered much to John Wayne because he was dead. He died in 1979. And this week, we've seen Enid Blyton condemned by English Heritage for being, quote-unquote, racist and xenophobic. By today's standards, certainly this is true, but she was born in 1897, which might explain why she doesn't live up to the standards of 21st century intersectionalists. But let's get back to the living. So, one woman who fell victim to cancel culture this week was Jess Devals, a textile artist based in London. This is what Andrew Neil had to say about her on his show on Thursday.
2 years ago, she wrote a blog saying she did not subscribe to gender identity ideology. That is to say, although she supports anyone's right to identity, however they choose, she believes that the reality of biological sex cannot be denied and is crucial when it comes to upholding the rights of women. This happens to be the view of most feminists, most people for that matter, but it took only 8 complaints before her work was removed by the Royal Academy. A few angry tweets and institutions, from companies to art galleries, run for cover, dumping innocence on the way. They seem to think that Twitter is public opinion. So now a little-known artist is deprived of income from the Royal Academy despite doing nothing wrong. But she shouldn't worry. After all, cancel culture is a myth, isn't it?
And joining me on my panel today, I have comedians Steve N. Allen and Leo Kearse. Hello there. I don't know if you heard my preachy monologue there. I was talking a little bit about cancelling the dead, because, I mean, we've had cancel culture. We're all used to that now. We know how that works. We've got the gist. But now cancelling corpses. I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? What do you make of the Enid Blyton case, Steve?
Well, she's not really being cancelled. The headline make it sound as if, what, we're going to go and burn all those books and never be allowed to be printed. Well, actually, just something was written on a website saying that that some of the books had been criticised, which I believe is true.
I think her blue plaque, the official blue plaque with English Heritage, is being altered to reflect her racism and xenophobia.
Then they've said that they wouldn't change the word on that, they'd change details on the website. But even if they would, I'd fine. I mean...
You're fine with that? You think
well,
that's
you can change a blue plaque. I don't read a lot of blue plaques, and if you're adding greater context, there is a big difference between changing words on a plaque and stopping a book being published. And one of them is really terrible, and it sounds like we're doing that, but actually we're not.
What about the example of Dr. Seuss? So the estate of Dr. Seuss has actually withdrawn a number of its titles from sales, from publication. So those things, they're not completely inaccessible. I know there are some copyright libraries that have absolutely everything, but, you know, children aren't going to make that trip, are they? I mean, is that healthy? Is that helpful?
But then what do you... Because, again, the headlines make it look like someone has cancelled, forced this act upon them, but it's the estate of Dr. Seuss that's made that decision. What do? It's difficult to work out. You have the right to not do that. If they were forced by some angry Twitter people to never be allowed to be printed again, I would be so against it. I'm not in favour of it. I'm just saying all of the headlines make it seem like more's being cancelled than actually is.
So I suppose just to explain to people, so what's going on here is there are certain depictions within the books of people of different ethnicities, depictions of women, that kind of thing, within Dr. Seuss and within Enid Blyton, and that's causing all the trouble. But of course, these people come from a culture in which they would have felt that way inevitably, because we're all products of our culture to a degree. I can't help think, though, that a lot of the activists who are angry about it probably would have felt the same had they been born in 1897. And the thing is, might it not be able... I understand what you're saying, that criticism is fine. Like, I'm all for criticism, and even if that is a moral judgment, I don't think it's really useful when it comes to literary criticism, by the way, because we don't know anything about these authors from the past, really, or what they felt or thought, and I just don't know how helpful it is. And also, I think if we start not eliminating, but if we neglect major authors in the Western canon because of their moral shortcomings, we probably wouldn't have anything left. So I'm not sure about the utility of it, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I agree that if you dig deep enough, you can find a reason to be thoroughly upset, and that should not be a good enough reason to cancel. But I don't think we're necessarily cancelling. As you say, criticism's fine. Putting things in context is the only thing you can do. It's not, you can't blindly say, oh, it's perfectly OK to use those words left, right and centre. Some of the words from the book you wouldn't be able to say now because of Ofcom.
But if books are being removed from sale, if the Doctor's Use books are being removed from circulation, then they are being cancelled.
They're not. Well, they're only being removed by the people who own the books. No one's...
Yeah, but
no one's shutting
it
them
doesn't
down.
matter who's... I mean, they're doing that. They're bowing to public pressure. They're bowing to, what they think is public pressure, but it's just some angry green-haired people on Twitter.
But it's not what the word cancel means, though, is it? You've not been cancelled. Can you cancel yourself?
Well, I think cancellation, to me, is just a metaphor for this kind of mass pressure that comes from activists. I mean, you might have a different view about that. Might it not be... Let me just put something to you, though. Might it not be more helpful when it comes to these books, particularly for children that have these sort of what we would now call problematic depictions, to be able to explain to them in an educational context? This is why they're represented this way, not because any of us now today support that kind of representation, but because actually this is quite helpful, because what we're saying is, at this time in history, within this culture, people felt this way. We've moved on, we've progressed, we've become more enlightened, and actually, by almost anaesthetising that, in a sense, you're kind of not doing the cause any favours. Is that a fair point?
Yeah, I mean, it should be used as a sort of launch pad for a conversation for kids that are, ready for that conversation. But also, what it's doing with all these depictions, so Doctor Seuss, The Simpsons, all these things, they weren't done with ill intent. So it's going to put a pressure on artists and creators to not depict, to exclude different ethnicities. Because I mean, every character in The Simpsons is a gross nationalistic stereotype.
Well, there's a horrible Scottish stereotype, isn't there? Are you really upset by groundskeeper Willie? Is that
no?
To
be honest, I mean, he's a pretty good depiction, pretty positive.
I think he's quite mild compared to you. I mean, you seem far more Scottish to me. But then I remember reading this thing that Christopher Hitchens wrote about Roald Dahl, because of course there are two strands to this. Okay, there's the representation of the things that they wrote, right, and then there's actually the moral character of the authors themselves. That seems to come under scrutiny now. Now, with Roald Dahl, he's on the record as saying some pretty overtly anti-Semitic things, right? And I remember Christopher Hitchens writing about this, and he made the point that actually he would expect Roald Dahl to be a nasty piece of work. That actually, of course, he was twisted in all sorts of ways, because that's why his mind was able to produce these fabulous and grotesque and dark stories and characters. Why do we expect artists to be good people?
You're asking the right people, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's ridiculous, and we know from the comedy circuit, all the comedians who present themselves as like really nicey, lefty, lovely people, they're the most venal, evil people.
They're pretty vicious, but we're not going to name any names. But absolutely.
So I think people should be free to sort of have some failings, and we shouldn't judge people. Jesus had a good line about it. I can't remember what it was, but let he who hath not done anything bad.
Okay, that's the Christians. If you're going to quote the Bible, can you do it accurately? Because it's going to annoy everyone. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, so the context means that everything should be viewed... If you view it from the modern-day standard, that's fine, but it shouldn't mean the removal of any piece of work, because that way you never get to have the conversation that recorrects all of these errors. And then if you then never see anything that could be questioned or problematic, and you never have the conversation about why it's problematic, you just give society 100 years and it will create the same problems.
But the thing is, I think we do. I mean, I used to teach Of Mice and Men at school, and we had the conversation about the racial slurs in that book. Huckleberry Finn, similarly. I mean, but this is a very good example, for instance. There's a lot of republications of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain in America. I mean, actual physical books that take out the racial epithets in the book. So they are changing the artist's vision to better accord with contemporary concerns. Now, the problem with that, of course, is Huckleberry Finn is a satire, and it is an explicitly anti-racist, anti-slavery book. And actually, the impact of that is completely enervated if you take out the racism. So actually, you're almost doing a disservice to the cause of anti-racism, aren't you?
Yeah, actually, that's when you get into the difficult way of addressing these issues. Because if you then start banning any mention of certain things, then you stop that from happening. But again, I still think that even with putting things in context, you can reprint the book with the words changed, and at some point, as long as it's written on the book that it's that version, then it's okay. It's like having a warning before Gone with the Wind. the way that story was told, as if somehow you'll never be allowed to see that film ever again. Available absolutely everywhere, just with sometimes it's got a little preface
I don't
to
think
it.
you'll never be able to see it. It just annoys me. I feel a bit patronised, like, you know, when there's in front of Carry On films, you know, this film from 50 years ago may have slightly different ethical views. Well, yeah, because it was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I know that. I don't need some executive at Netflix to tell me that.
I get annoyed with Channel 5 telling us there might be some swear words in a film, as if that somehow is going to make me faint. But it already happened. It's just we're adding another category of things that might be upsetting.
But it is the sort of blandifying of culture. We're sort of chewing people's food before they eat it. And I think people should be allowed to, you know, take it lumps and all.
Yeah. OK, so that's cancellation of the dead, which I think is just going to keep on going. By the way, that can be an endless task. Like, I think you could probably cancel anyone in the past.
And it's better than cancelling me. I'm still alive. I hate being cancelled. It costs me money.
And you're a big guy. I wouldn't want to cancel you. It'd be scary, you know. And also, you can defend yourself. You know, these people can't defend themselves. But, you know, and also, it does strike me as a little bit selective, you know, a lot of this. You know, there's that statue of Eric Gill at Broadcasting House. Sorry, it's not of Eric Gill. It's by Eric Gill. It's of Ariel and Prospero, I think. And Eric Gill was a horrible sexual predator, molested his daughters and his dog. You know, by his own admission, in his own words. This isn't speculative. But no one's protesting about that. It seems to be sort of weirdly... because ultimately, with these kind of campaigns, it is going to be selective without any particular purpose. Like the statue of Gandhi. I mean, you know, yes, absolutely, Mahatma Gandhi will have said some things about African people that we find absolutely abhorrent, but he also freed India from the British. That's quite a good thing, isn't it? I mean, are we putting the statue up to commemorate his racism or to commemorate his non-violent resistance to British rule and the Raj? What do you think?
Yeah, things are always presented totally shorn of context. The same with Churchill. I mean, Churchill, you know, I'm sure did some terrible things during the course of the war, but he beat Hitler, who was,
that was quite good.
On balance, worse than Churchill.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Abraham Lincoln abolishing slavery. You'd think he'd get a free pass, but a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests were actually trying to tear down statues of... You see what I mean? Like, I think there is a kind of excess. I take your point, like protest and context. You know, you can put plaques next to things. You can educate people, explain, this is quite a dodgy character from the past. We don't support this now. But I think the sort of mania for tearing things down and stuff, I just mistrust it.
And I revert back to my standard position from earlier as well with, you probably could have a good argument and win that argument and get a statue taken down. Could have spent that time and effort doing something that might be higher up the list of priorities of making life better for people.
Get to Libya with your AK-47 and shut down.
Now, we can't go back to this Libya conversation because it's just too contentious. But let's consider cancellations today, though, is a different matter. Now, I think because here we've got, you know, it's all very well slagging off Ben Johnson or Christopher Marlowe or something. I'm sure they don't mind. But when we're slagging off someone who's alive today and actually affecting their work, I mean, one of the weirdest things I find about this debate is you see sort of prominent people saying all the time, well, who's been cancelled? I don't see any. And I just think, are you kidding? I mean, I've tried creating and collating a list of what we call cancellations, and it was just when I was writing a book on free speech, and it was just too long. It went on and on and on. The examples are absolutely endless. The thing is, we only hear about the high-profile celebrity examples of this. But if you take the new organisation Counterweight, which is run by Helen Pluckrose, which is an organisation that pushes for social liberalism as the best way to combat racism and injustice, and she is inundated with people who've been disciplined, fired, they've been attacked at work simply for opinions. These aren't sort of racists who want to go on a rant or anything like that. These are just decent people who are falling foul of cancel culture. So the idea that it's a myth is a myth. So we do have to sort of get over that. The examples are numerous. The example this week, which I wanted to mention to you guys, is the one of Jess Duvall's. And that's the one that I mentioned earlier. And here's a very tangible example of someone who, you know, she's not famous. She's not got lots of money, contacts, in the way that someone like J.K. Rowling has, who obviously, you know, you can't cancel someone like that. She's the world's richest author, you know, she's just far too powerful. And no publisher in their right mind would do that. But Gillian Phillip, the Scottish children's author, she lost her agent, didn't she? Or was it her publisher? One of the two. Because she simply supported Rowling. So you notice that the small fry, they're dispensable. Cancel culture, which a lot of people misrepresent as just holding the rich and powerful to account, but it's nothing of the kind, because for the most part, it affects the little people, it affects the ordinary people. Jess Duvall's is an interesting one. So she wrote this blog post just talking about her views of gender-critical feminism. And she wasn't being transphobic. I've read the blog. She wasn't being transphobic, she wasn't being hateful. She was expressing the view that she doesn't believe, as Debbie Hayton was saying earlier, she doesn't believe in gender identity. She doesn't believe that's a thing. She believes that there is a biological sex, that we are a biologically dimorphic species. And she's not hateful in any of this. And I understand that there are hateful people who will, in a sense, use that argument as a kind of guise for that prejudice. But that she doesn't fall into this category, or there's certainly no evidence that she does. And yet her artwork was removed from the Royal Academy. So that's a source of income, explicitly a source of income that has now been deprived from her for her opinion. Could anyone look her in the eye and say cancel culture is a myth?
Well, I mean, on one hand, it's nice to see feminists getting cancelled. After they cancelled, after they cancelled the walk-on girls at the darts and the Grand Prix and ruined our fun. I mean, how many feminists are watching the darts? But they've got to, like, you know, cancel the walk-on girls at the darts. So it's like, well, now you're getting cancelled.
Is that a big trauma for you, not be able to ogle the girls at the darts?
It's the only good thing about the darts. Like the hooliganism is the only good thing about the football.
Goodness me, I do not support anything that Leo is saying.
But
right?
also, I mean,
emphasise that.
I mean, especially around you know, the issues that are very contentious right now around transgender rights. So you've got self-identification, which means that, you know, me or Steve could just say that we're women and then, you know, get access to women's safe spaces. And you've also got the medication and transitioning of children, which, I mean, we've got to have a discussion around that. I mean, I hate to sound like a bigot, but maybe we shouldn't be chucking hormones into, you know, preteen children, you know?
Steve, what do you say to that?
Well, I think it's right that we should have a discussion about that. I imagine if we talk for long enough, we would probably disagree on some of the issues, but that's absolutely fine. If I hear you say something that I disagree with, we'll have a chat. We'll continue to talk about it. There is nothing other than punishing being done by then saying, oh, you disagree with me, but then your work of art should not be allowed to be seen.
Yeah.
It's your work of art. I mean, you're a comedian, so it's more likely that you could change minds. But an artist putting something in a gift shop or whatever, unless it's secretly written on the back, oh, by the way, here's what I think, you're not changing minds, so therefore you're not you're not winning any arguments by ruining someone's career. You're just punishing, and therefore you stop the debate being held.
Well, thanks both for being so candid about that. Still to come on Free Speech Nation this afternoon, Jeff Norcott's talking about his new book, and that's coming up right after this break.